that knows how to work StreamYard.
3, 2, 1. What is up, everybody? It is 8:45, September 19th. It's a Thursday. It's a game week. We're playing Illinois on a Friday night. The Huskers are 3-0 for the first time since 2016. Feels good. Feels great to be undefeated. Feels good for the boys to be first time that we've enjoyed a September in, 8 years? Feels good. We've got a very special guest that is joining us this evening. Ryan from the Shutdown Fullcast, which we'll properly introduce in 1 second as soon as we get through our ad reads, which are just us, as you guys know. So we need you guys to wait. Let's see if this thing. There we go. Go check out pipeline-jerky.com. We just had an awesome tailgate at the Omaha Steaks event 2 weeks ago at the Colorado game. Thanks everybody for coming out and joining us. But check out pipeline-jerky.com. Ryan, for your information, this is what we created as an NIL venture to support the Nebraska football offensive line. Every bag sold of Pipeline Jerky. And we got some coming your way too, Ryan. Supports our offensive line. Every bag pays a royalty directly to the guys in the picture. We've got some awesome stuff going with them. We've got some tailgates. We've got partnership with Omaha Steaks. We've got some dinners. We've got some pipeline steak boxes. We've got all sorts of fun stuff. So make sure you guys check out pipeline-steaks.com. And also, we don't have a slide for it, but check out HuskGuysStore.com. Got a lot of cool merch. This is the year stuff. A lot of the good Huskers run the ball gear. So please check that out. And without further ado, Andrew, I'll let you do the full proper introduction.
Yeah,
our big time
problem. No problem. All right, so tonight we've got A1 Ryan Nanni here, flatteringly dressed up as a bloomin' onion. One of the first Google results that comes back when you Google Ryan Nanni, which must be fun.
really doing wonders for my
it must get you a lot of interesting people barking up that tree. But Ryan is from the Shutdown Fullcast fame. He's got a new podcast going on called We're Not All Like This, and that's a deep dive into a lot of different features on a lot of different college football programs. He is a national writer, a national voice, and really the Fullcast is one of my places to go when I just want to feel like I'm in a college dorm drinking some beers with the buds again, talking about absolute nonsense and taking it wherever it goes. It's an awesome listen. Highly recommend. Ryan, introduce yourself a little more and tell us a little bit about like the Fullcast, and then we'll get into some Nebraska talk later, but you go ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you all for having me, and Andrew, thank you for coming on the Nebraska episode of We're Not All Like This, which just recently dropped.
It was awesome.
I hope people enjoy it. Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it, for sure. What to say about the Shutdown Fullcast? I guess if we're gonna go all the way back into the deep lore, it originally started as a video series called the Shutdown Fullback, which you can still find on YouTube, which I had nothing to do with. Spencer and Jason were the stars of it. And this was during a period in media history where YouTube was like, I don't know, we'll just give you some money if you make some content. Because believe it or not, there was a time when YouTube's concern was there's not enough stuff on YouTube. That's how long ago this was. I don't know how many episodes of Shutdown Fullback ran. It was extremely zany, like very Adult Swimmy in a lot of ways.
We have a picture.
Okay. Oh, good. So you've done your research. So that turned into eventually the Shutdown Fullcast, which was like, if you're like, where'd you come up with this name? It's really, yep, there it is. there are sweet, beautiful boys front and center. That turned into the Shutdown Fullcast podcast, which I was not on originally. I forget like who the original, if there was an original third host or if they were just rotating guests and I like was one of the rotations and then they kept me on. We're talking like over 10 years ago now at this point. It's been a long time that we've been doing this incredibly stupid podcast. Holly Anderson, who had written with Jason and Spencer and I before and had had respectable jobs at places like Sports Illustrated and Grantland and things like that. I forget exactly when she came into the fold more regularly and not as just like fun guests that we had. But now we've just been doing it so long that it is... why it exists and who it is for and what it does are like impossible questions to answer. The simplest answer I can give you is we are basically logging on every week just to goof with one another. Like
Yeah.
the dorm room vibe is very accurate in part because I think there are a lot of times where we kind of forget that this is a show other people will listen to and may have feelings about. So sometimes that means we say some. I don't think we're intentionally provocative, but we are weird. We are just like deeply, deeply weird people, and as a result, sometimes we talk about college football a lot, and sometimes we talk
Yes.
about college football not at all. It's a very, very hard show to explain to other people, and I will say that my wife does not listen to it and is like, I just don't. I live with you and I see you be weird
Yeah.
enough. I don't need to add that to like my media diet.
Right.
That wouldn't be a good thing for me.
Hashtag coexist. Yeah.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great way of describing it. It's like there's a loose skeleton of college football in there somewhere.
Yes.
And sometimes you
yes.
just have to dig a little harder to find it.
Yes. You're like, oh, it smells terrible. What are
it's
they
great.
doing in there?
Yeah, we'll get through this. Yeah, no, it's really an awesome time. It really does take me back to college, and then now you've kind of spun it into like, I mean, you've got the full cast after dark. You've got people that almost like look forward to you. I mean, has that sunk in? Does that blow your mind that there's people like on Saturday nights? They're like, God, I can't wait to see the BS that spews from this man's mouth. Like, I can't wait.
Well,
anymore.
when you put it that way, now I don't know how I feel. No, we have been fortunate enough to do this for long enough and to do enough like live shows where we get to meet listeners and things like that. That I am aware of it and I am deeply appreciative of it. And I also am pretty happy with like the level of quote unquote fame that I have.
Yes.
Like the best example I can give you is I can go around Nashville where I live, minding my own business.
Yeah.
Nobody bothers me because nobody knows who I am. And that's totally fine with me. But one time I was in Costco with my family and a guy walked by with his family, peeled away from them and was like, hold on, I'll be right back. Came over, like shook my hand and was like, hey, I'm a big fan of the show, blah, blah, blah. He was very cool about it. I want to be clear. This was not like weird. This was not like boundary overstepping, whatever. And my daughter, who's 7, was like, oh my God, Dad is famous. This is amazing.
Yes.
And I'm like, nope. Because if you're actually famous, you can't go to Costco at all.
No, you send
But
people there for you.
I could go to Costco whenever I want, and only one time have I ever been bothered. So I have this good balance of we know we have a audience that's a lot of fun and likes what we do, and at the same time, I'm not actually famous. Being actually famous is so much harder.
Yeah.
So much harder. I don't think I could do that.
You are. I mean, you're what, days away from the 100K? Is that a milestone on Twitter for you?
A little less so than it used to be, in part because I'm just like, how many of them are like weird porn bots at this point? Does it really count? Does it really count if it's 100K and you're like, oh, 15,000 of them are just trying to get me to click on a malware link? Like, I don't know how much that counts at that point.
The rest are family.
This is funny. I mean, for me, I followed. So everybody go to @celebrityhottub on Twitter. I followed you for 10, 15 years, but you're nameless and faceless on there. So you were always just one of those like beautiful, blind, anonymous, very, very funny accounts that I followed forever. So when Andrew's like, oh, we're having Ryan on, I'm like, no way. Like the old like Coming to America guy. Like
right. Yes.
That's literally all I know you as. I actually thought, I don't know. I was like, maybe he's black. I don't know. It could be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sure. Decidedly not. To be very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Twitter's one of those things where I started doing it when I was still a lawyer and I still had a respectable day job, and I was like, my employers probably would not like for people to Google me, and this is the first thing that comes up. Once I sort of left respectability behind and became a clown media member, I did briefly try to change my profile picture on Twitter to just my face,
Right.
and people got so mad. They're like,
So
"I don't like this." And that's a really good summation of the social media experience.
Please go
You're
back.
like, "Hey, this is what I look like." Everybody's like, "Gross."
Please go
Put it
back.
away.
We just can't deal with this. I don't
Yes,
have time. I
correct.
just
Correct.
need you to go back.
Yes. And so I did. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, like, yeah, so the next project, I mean, that we've been talking about, that we're not all like this. It's been going on for what, maybe 2 years now. You've gotten 25 to 30-ish schools now, and featuring everybody's fan bases and kind of doing deep dive questions. Like, I was very impressed with the depth of the questions that you were asking.
Thank you.
I was like, this guy's read a book. And it must be fun, intimidating, kind of like adventurous. I don't know. Like, how would you describe this podcast and like your experience with it? And then also,
yeah.
I kind of want to know where we fit in on the crazy scale a little bit for you.
Okay. I'm going to answer those questions in reverse order.
Please.
I did not find the Nebraska fans I talked to, and really most of the Nebraska fans that I deal with on the internet, to be that outlandish. Like,
Okay. We'll take that.
Is there some of it? Yeah. And I know if you go to like Nebraska message boards, you can find like, but that's true of like almost everybody's message board.
People crawling out of the gutters.
Yeah. I think there are fan bases that are way more bonkers, way more twisted up. Now, granted, some of that is that as y'all mentioned, you're 3-0. But I think there also has been, I don't want to say humbling, because that makes it sound like Nebraska fans have deserved it in some way, but the last 10 to 15 years of rooting for the Huskers have certainly tamped down, I suspect, any real urge to be like, I'm going to show my ass. I'm going to really like show people what a dumbass I am, because it just like, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been fun. And I think when you go through something like Florida fans right now are staring down their third losing season in a row.
Oh my God.
Something they haven't done since like the 40s or something.
Can you imagine?
Like that. And are kind of losing their minds. But yeah, I just like, maybe it's because like Nebraska fans are too nice. Maybe it's because Nebraska fans are sort of like adjusting to the new world and sort of like where things used to live in it. I think like if you had asked me this question early into Nebraska moving to the Big Ten, the answer probably would have been different, because I suspect a lot of Nebraska fans at that point were probably like, we are about to go run shit. Like, there's maybe 2 teams in this conference we have to worry about, but like we fully expect to be in the Big Ten championship every year.
Yeah. It
hasn't worked out that way. But you know what? I could say that about Miami and the ACC as well. They're still deeply broken people. So I guess you're just better human beings than Miami fans are, which I do feel comfortable saying.
Yeah, it is. It has been a humbling experience to get some like almost kind of like forced rationality a little bit, where you're just like, okay,
right,
okay.
Yes.
And I now realize I have been wrong for a decade. Okay, like, but I'm now moving on to 2024, and
we can't talk trash to anybody, because it's
definitely
like
the year. Yeah.
You're like, hey, Minnesota, you stink, and they're like, we beat you 4 straight times. Like, well, Illinois, we're gonna crush you. Like, we beat you 3 of the last 4. Like, when you can't talk trash to literally anybody because they all have receipts.
Yes.
You're in big trouble.
Yeah, 100%.
So what have you found like throughout the course of, I don't know, doing research and like other programs? Is there, I don't want to alienate you or anything from other fan bases, but are there other programs where you have just been talking to these fans and said, "Oh, this is something else"?
So I think 2 things stick out. One is that the title of the show is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I think like what's been interesting about the show is that it sort of takes the idea that fan bases are not a monolith. Like, there's not one type of Nebraska fan. There's not one type of Ohio State fan or Oregon fan or whatever. Like these are big groups that span different age ranges, and like it's hard to put them in a box. At the same time, there are lots of things that do make fan bases the same, and that makes sense because like they're communities and they have like shared values, they have shared history, like there are these points. And so a lot of fun for me of the podcast is figuring out like where is the title true and where is the title false. Like in the Nebraska episode, I asked all three of y'all, like, where is the point where sort of Nebraska fans say that's where things went south? And everybody said it's some combination of Solich fired, Peterson coming in.
Yeah.
Like I thought somebody was going to say like, I think it was when we fired Bo Pelini. That got talked about and that's in the episode, but that's not like I like the points of unanimity. I think the first episode I did was the Auburn episode, and that's a really interesting fan base because they're bananas and broken, but they're all very aware of it. Like there aren't really that many delusional Auburn fans. They sort of know, like they understand what's happened. They have shared a state with the most accomplished college football coach any of us will ever see.
Yeah.
And they have had to deal, and they've had to do that while already being like the minority program or the sort of like the less popular program in the state. Like even before Nick Saban showed up,
yeah,
it was maybe a little closer, but it wasn't. It's not an Auburn state, and they understand that like that has created brain rot in them. That no matter how good they are. Auburn has won a national championship in our recent memory. Auburn played in another one. Auburn has been to an SEC championship game not all that long ago. Auburn beat Bama way more than almost anybody else did. But the proximity of it and the fact that you're just like bathed in like I see Crimson Tide fans every day, and I constantly reminded of like what we are not. That was really interesting to me because I think that's the fan base that sticks out as like, oh, they have cracked, but they're sort of like, I'm not a well person, and I don't expect to be
years
well
of neglect.
Yes,
that they have been bottling and is just ready to explode every fall.
Yeah, I mean, the other interesting thing is that and this came up on the Nebraska episode as well. Almost every fan base, and this is not true of I think the teams who are really good right now. So like this wasn't true of Georgia. What fans really want is like respect and acknowledgement and a feeling of like it's nice to win a national title. Don't get me wrong. It is more important in some ways to feel like we belong here. Here being in the conference we play in, here being at the top, in the top 25, here being like in the conversation for who's going to win the national championship, even if we don't win it. Yeah. That's like the one thing that is common to everybody, almost to a T, across the board, is like this feeling of we want to feel acknowledged, and we sort of want the outside world to think that our team and our experience is as special as we think it is.
True.
I think that it resonates with me in a lot of ways. I've been texting a lot of friends a lot the last 3 weeks for us, because one of the things I've been talking a lot about, this is like so pathetic, but this is like the phase of life we're in, the school drop-off line, and being able to drop your kid off and be able to walk in there and be like, we won this weekend. Is one of the most magical feelings, because everybody's got it on their chest. Everyone's like, hey,
chest out.
Like,
his chest out, getting out of the minivan.
Yeah, Tennessee's got it, Georgia's got it, Alabama's got it. Whoever won gets to like walk down that pickup line. But to me, and I think too, like the differentiator of like what separates like crazy fans too is like even in Alabama and in Texas and some of the in particular SEC schools, is that lack of compliment in the pickup line or at the local bar or at the local business drives them so nuts that they are going to write a $250,000 check to get a new quarterback. That to me is like the next level of like, I like it because I like it and I'm a Nebraska fan, but like that next level of being like, you know what? I'm so sick of losing. I'm right. The checkbook's coming out, honey. Like we're not going on vacation.
Like, I don't think there's much the NFL is jealous about of college football.
Yeah.
The idea that people love these teams so much, and I think that's true in the NFL as well, but like there's no reason to, and there's no like pathway, but like I'm sure somebody in the NFL is like, we have over here, they make millions of dollars from people who just want the team to be better and are just going to write them a check. And they don't necessarily get that much. Like, yeah, you get to like go to a meet and greet with the coach and you get good football tickets and this, that, or the other. But like, just in terms of what your money is buying, the NFL must be like, oh man, we got to figure out a way to make this happen.
It's a free. I mean, previously free labor, and then just people who are going to write checks with no ROI expected. They don't want their name on a building, nothing. Just purely like, just give me that offensive lineman, give me that D line.
Right.
I mean, that to me is like next level, and why this arms race is going to be nuts.
Oh my god.
Well, like you've seen the thing Tennessee's announced that they're doing with season tickets going forward.
Yeah.
Like if the NFL, if Dallas Cowboys could roll out and say like, hey, season tickets are going up $500, and it's a go get good free agents fund.
Yeah,
like that would be wild. But in college football, just like I guess that's what we're doing now.
The crazy part about it, and this is, I mean, I don't think Tennessee fans are necessarily crazier than Nebraska. Most Tennessee fans I've talked to are like, yeah, I'll pay that.
Yes. Yeah,
that's good. I'm like, well, no, are you guys upset with like the university that makes hundreds of millions of dollars and pays your athletic director $3 and your head coach $9? They're like, no. Yeah, no, I'll pay my part. I'm like, all of you?
Good Lord.
Yep.
How are you, Ryan? You said you have at least one kid. Kids, plural?
I have two. Yeah, I got two kids. I got a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old. Are they asleep? Who's to say? So they might come bounding up the stairs at some point.
It might not happen all night. It's it's a guessing game. How are you raising them in this college football environment?
So I'm a Florida alum. My wife went to Tennessee. We live in Nashville, so we are at a place with my daughter right now where she roots for Florida sometimes, she roots for Tennessee sometimes. We try to not deal with it that directly when they play each other. Yeah.
Right.
And I think what we mostly try to imbue is a sense of like, please don't like these schools. Like if you become a Georgia fan, that becomes a real pain for us. Please don't do that.
Make our lives so much harder.
Yeah. So we're mostly like trying to, cause I don't know, like I took her to her first college football game last weekend. Just like Vanderbilt was playing Alcorn State, so we went.
Yeah.
And she had a good time.
Was game day at that game?
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
I thought they were at Alcorn State.
Yeah.
First Andy.
She did make us stay for the entirety of a 55-0 blowout by Vanderbilt, which I was just sort of like, I appreciate your dedication, but please can we go home? It's 9:45. I don't need to be here anymore.
You must think they're so good.
Yeah. I mean, like, part of it is that given what's happened with Florida, now that my kids are like, my daughter at least is of like an age where she can kind of understand what's going on. I'm like, this is not a great time to hop you on that bandwagon right now. So it's mostly you can root for who you want to root for.
Okay.
I'll tell you the wildest thing. Sometimes I'll just have a game on and it can just be, I don't know, like it's Michigan State's playing Iowa or something like that. She's a front runner. She's just like, who's winning? I'm rooting for that team.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm like, sure, whatever.
Well, it's tough to lure her into Florida right now.
Yes. I would be a bad parent if I was like, hey, 2024 is the year you go deep into Florida fanhood.
Yeah. So here's an article that came up. This was one of my favorite phrases of the entire season so far. Florida lacks urgency to fire Billy Napier despite, quote, aura of inevitability, an insider says. What's an aura of inevitability, and how would you describe that at this current juncture?
So sometimes
it's just an aura.
It's a powerful aura. It's a miasma. It's a full on smoke cloud. sometimes coaches come into the season on a hot seat, as Billy Napier did, and you sort of walk through, okay, here are the different permutations where you keep your job, you maybe like really pull yourself out of the fire, and you not only keep your job, but you get an extension. Here's where you get fired quickly, here's where you get fired late. I think all of the and all of the discussion of Florida football this offseason was the schedule. The strength of schedule is so hard. They have to play Miami and UCF and Florida State in the non-conference. Right. They draw Ole Miss and A&M and Georgia and Tennessee and probably somebody else that I'm forgetting in the conference slate. But it all kind of assumed, like, well, Florida will look like it knows what it's doing. Florida will like be doing its best. And instead, Florida walked straight into the party and started throwing up. And so that's why it's an aura of an inevitability. If you walk straight into the bar and you start throwing up, you are going to get thrown out. It's not a mystery. It is a question of like, will they let you stop throwing up? Yes. Will they sort of like decide what to do with you? Will they be so worried that they have to call an ambulance? But the question of are you being thrown out of this bar as you projectile vomit is answered.
That's the easy part.
Yeah, so that's sort of where we're at right now with Florida.
She's back. I want to ask one because
go for it.
This has got me thinking about this. So let me take you back to 2018. Florida needs a new coach. This is post Jim McElwain.
Yes.
Randy Shannon had one season. And there was a hot, one of the hottest young coaches in America was down in Florida. He had just gone undefeated. He had took a team from last place, 0-12, to first place. This was a slam dunk hire that the hottest coach, can't miss coach, interviewed with Scott Strickland. I've got it on good authority. That's like that's his name, right? Scott Strickland?
Yeah.
Interviews with Scott Strickland. Things didn't go that well. And anyway, there was a team up north that was able to swoop in and steal him. And Scott Frost became Nebraska's coach, and he was the chosen one.
Yep. The prodigal son.
Dude.
Thank God he came in and saved this program.
In an alternate universe,
Florida must have been jealous.
Would he have been done? Would he have been? I mean, you obviously got Dan Mullen. That didn't work out. Didn't work out for Scott Frost. It was a really disastrous hiring cycle in 2018. But I mean, what do you think of that? Do you think did you look at him? Did you think you had him? What was like the?
My recollection of that hiring cycle is that Chip Kelly was the name that people were like, oh, he's probably going to get the Florida job. And they certainly, I'm almost certain they offered the job to Chip Kelly. He took the UCLA job. I have a lot of theories as to why that was.
It went well for him too.
It went super well. I remember mostly the thought process of like, oh man, it kind of stinks to be rejected for UCLA, especially at that point in time. And like with Dan Mullen, it was the case of Scott Strickland had been his boss at Mississippi State before. So it was, famously, Dan Mullen had never been able to get another job out of Mississippi State, despite putting up like really good numbers. There were a lot of rumors about like he didn't interview that well, and he was kind of like a quirky guy and whatever. And there were concerns about his recruiting. Scott Frost, I think once the Nebraska job came open, I'm trying to remember, I don't remember if the Oregon job was open that year as well. I don't think it was, but maybe there were rumors that it was going to be, or maybe there's something like that. Mostly, I think everybody was just like, well, of course Scott Frost is going to take the Nebraska job. Like, why wouldn't he? It was the first. What sticks out about it is that's probably the hire that I think got the most national praise, that worked out the worst of almost any that I can remember across
Isn't
the
that
sport.
Incredible?
I mean, like, I don't think anybody
No one
was
doubted it.
particularly nobody was particularly critical about it. Some of that, frankly, was I think he was following Mike Riley, which was like a hire that people were like, Mike Riley's a perfectly nice person, but like this is not who you need to fix the problems that you have right now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, mostly what I remember is that that's the cycle, and you mentioned it, where like almost all the hires went poorly, and that's like I think the scariest thing about finding yourself in a hiring cycle is like sometimes all the options end up being kind of duds.
Yeah.
And it's just like the way that it works. I feel oddly comforted that there is nobody I look back on and I'm like, oh, if only Florida had hired that person. Because you get those years too, where you're like, we screwed up. We could have had this guy, but we let him go. That option does not exist in that year at all. The only regret I have is that the rumor was if Chip Kelly had taken the Florida job, Dan Mullen was going to take the Tennessee job. And I really don't think Dan Mullen would have done well with Tennessee fans and boosters. And I would like to have seen that.
They are just animals there. We also had heard from a good source that Scott Frost had showed up to that interview like wearing board shorts or something. That's might be, which is basically
it's Florida. That
Florida
seems like it should be okay.
It's Florida formal.
Yeah.
It's just, hey, Scott, biggest interview of your life. Maybe, throw it button on.
Just just try. I don't know. Just try. But is there anything else this year that you feel in college football has an aura of inevitability? Anything else that you're just saying, man, I've got a nice aura going on here?
Oh boy. That's a really tough question. I'll tell you this. There is an aura that the Big 12 is not going to give us an undefeated and probably not a one-loss champion. Like, I think that's going to be a very fun league. I
feel that
not
aura.
confident. There's going to be a lot of like, they're going to eat each other. And it'll be fun, and it'll be super competitive, and it's not a bad thing.
Like a Big Ten West, but bigger.
Yes.
And you get like a 8-4 champion.
Yeah. No. Weirdly, I think like this is one of the least inevitable years I think I've felt in a while. Like some of that is just how the schedule has played out so far, but like Georgia looks good. Do they look inevitable national champion good? No, I wouldn't quite say that.
Right.
Bama is the same way. Clemson certainly doesn't look inevitable. Miami looks very, very good, but is not going to play a schedule that really will inspire the level of confidence of like, oh, they can kick anybody they play. Like they can kick them up and down the field. Ohio State really hasn't had a competitor that they've had to play. Penn State has looked better and also has looked not better. It's an
interesting year with the whole playoff and being like, I don't know, 2 losses and we're fine, I guess. Like,
that's what's wild about it is like obviously you can't pick when you moved from the 4 to 12. Like it's just you just do it. This would be a very weird year to have a 14 playoff for a lot of reasons. Because one, the Big Ten and the SEC are so big at this point that it's just so big. Are we automatically giving them 2 spots, or what do we do if this team goes undefeated? But I truly don't think I could say with a lot of confidence right now, like, oh, it's inevitable that these 3 teams are going to be like the top of the heap in college football right now. There's a lot of fun teams and a lot of good teams, but I don't know that there's like the clear separation we've had in a lot of years past.
It has been a good time. I'm already like following these playoff rankings with just this crazy hopefulness that like
yes.
And I really appreciated your recent Fullcast episode of what if the current undefeated teams did stay undefeated, and it was like Nebraska versus Toledo in the playoffs.
Yeah, awesome. Sure. Why not? Let's make it happen. Like, might as well.
Let's talk about it. Not enough people, not enough media sources covering that, and that's why I go to you guys.
Huskers in the playoff as the 9 seed, right? I think it's 9 seed. It's great.
Yeah, versus Memphis or Toledo.
Whatever it was by Spencer, I'm sure it was very well considered and thought out.
Very well thought out.
Yeah.
The other part of your show that I have to pick your brain about is what I would say. There's a lot of curiosities you guys bring up in college football. Just a lot of things that are not talked about.
Sure.
And everything from just ridiculous trophies to weird sub headlines to strange coach antics and things.
Yeah.
I just threw together a collage of strange things here. Everything from Joe Burrow being depantsed to Brian Kelly wanting to execute his team to grinding on his players to Mayo getting dumped on heads. The weirdness of college football is just it is my lifeblood. It is like why I come back every single year. And I think you guys capture it so well. What are the big things that if you were going to open a curiosity shop, if you were going to open Ryan Nanni's, this is the side of college football we want you to see. This is what you'd buy a ticket to come into this little museum. What are you putting in there? What do you think gets people in the door?
I think if you're just if I'm just talking to people who have no context.
Yeah.
And no
just a tourist walking by.
Yeah. I'm going to start with the mascots for sure.
Okay.
The fact that we have still a number of live animals. It is and not just
on
sure.
fields. On fields.
Ugga is cute. And we have some that are just oh, isn't that sweet? But we also have very large,
yes,
kind of dangerous animals that we trot out there. What was it, 2 years ago when the Sooner Schooner flipped?
Yeah, a major wreck.
These are bonkers things that have nothing to do with the football going on. This is just sort of this isn't even the appetizer. This is what you get when you're waiting for a table. This is what college football has to offer you. Just having to explain to somebody, okay, they're the Auburn Tigers. Here's an eagle that's going to fly around the stadium. Here's how that works. Here's the Stanford tree. A student makes it, and it's different every year, and it's supposed to look like that. It's supposed to look deeply broken.
It's like a home art project.
Yeah, that's the... It stands out in such stark contrast to me because the NFL has mascots. And
Sure.
Sometimes they're fun and interesting or whatever, but they all feel very much they feel professional. Okay, somebody sat down and made a decision about this is how this should work and this is what this character should do and kids will have fun and whatever. And in college sports, it's all right, now Little Red is going to get upside down inside his costume and bounce on his head, and it's going to be horrible.
20 minutes.
Purdue Pete, just Purdue Pete, and his horrifying visage is that. I think is the easiest way to sort of get people in the door and show them here is how weird college football is, that even the part that you're supposed to take your family to go take pictures, or they'll put this on the t-shirt, the university has signed off on all of this, even this part is super weird and super strange, and half of it is just well, we've just been doing that for 50 years, so we're gonna do it for 50 more.
I love it. It is truly it's why you keep coming back.
Yes.
My goodness, the chance of a Sooner wrecking at any given moment.
Gosh,
it's reason
I think
enough to go to
Ralphie,
a game.
the Colorado buffalo.
Yeah, we got buffalo on the field.
Yes,
that is a giant animal.
That could just go so wrong one of these times.
Yes, when Bevo almost killed Ugga at I think the Cotton Bowl.
Just a spearing.
These are, and this is the tamed down version. This is LSU is not trotting out the live tiger anymore. Michigan had, this is a long time ago, way before any of us, but Michigan had a live Wolverine on the sideline for maybe a decade, and they were this is not workable. We're not doing this anymore.
That's a good workshop.
The Maryland Ohio State trophy, the traveling trophy, used to be an actual turtle. Now it's just a statue of a turtle, but originally they were just exchanging an actual live turtle.
Yeah,
It's a weird place. It's a weird, weird place.
I love it. Well, let's get into our final and most important segment, I suppose. Are we good? Is Nebraska good?
Ooh.
And let's just start there.
I'm going to do the annoying thing. If I had asked you at the start of the season before a single game was played, what does it mean for Nebraska to be good? What would sort of the check marks be that you would give me in that regard?
Dave?
Exactly what we're seeing.
Okay.
No, there's
Maybe a little more.
No, I think it's God. I mean, you kind of hinted on in the beginning where like we've seen such bad football for 10 years that it's hard for us to even like wrap our heads around good football. But we're Nebraska fans. We know good football when we see it, and there's so many like sort of intangible basic things that like I was just texting with my dad about this. How like we can complete screen passes now, and we don't fumble snaps.
It's fun.
And we tackle people, and it's like that was literally like Dylan Raiola, who's a 5-star, the number 1 quarterback in the country. I'm mostly thrilled with him because he completes screen passes. I just am like, oh, did you see that? Like we haven't completed like consistent screen passes in 10 years. So I think there's that basic just good football that we're seeing. We're seeing good, competent football, completed forward passes, like just basic things. But then I think. Yeah, I would say 3-0. I'm thrilled with. So I think
3-0. Yeah, I mean the thing that stuck out last week, I guess, is I didn't think we played that well. I mean, we had some very bright moments, and it was awesome, and I loved it. But like, we only ran 48 plays. They ran several more than us. They had the ball for like 38 minutes, and that was Northern Iowa. However, we scored 31 points on 48 plays. And so I think like, I guess good to me is taking some blows on the chin a little bit, getting those wake up calls. But then like at the end of the day, you're like, wow, that score was a fun score. Like that we actually turned lemons into lemonade.
Yeah, I'll say one more thing before I'm always curious what outsiders think of us, but because we've been broken so much, like Bo Pelini won 9 games every single year. We took it for granted. And then that was certainly one of the things where we went wrong. But there was that element of like, he just went in and won the games he was supposed to win. And that to me is getting back to like good of like, if we beat Illinois, we should beat Illinois. We should beat Colorado. We should beat Indiana. We should beat Purdue. And the fact over the last 10 years, it's been like, are we going to beat Purdue? And they beat us so many times. That's been frustrating. So I think there's that level of like, beat the teams you're supposed to, and then go to Ohio State and see what happens. But genuinely, the question of you, like, I don't know, what's an outsider think? Because we're guzzling Kool-Aid.
I think Nebraska, for the first time in a while, looks like they're doing what they want to do. Whether or not it works is like all teams, like, the plan, no plan is perfect. No game is like executed, certainly in the Colorado games, like, well, it's hard to plan against unusual officiating, like that's a hard thing to sort of like build into what you're doing. But the way I sort of like look at all teams that are quote unquote good is, do they have a plan and do they seem to be sticking to it? Like, this is why, not to bring it too close to home here, like, Iowa of recent vintages has been pretty good because the plan has been, we're going to play ferocious defense, we're going to be aggressive on special teams, and we're going to try not to make a lot of mistakes on offense. Like, it may not be pretty, and it may not be always exciting.
It certainly will not.
Like, but it's certainly like, this is the choice that we have made. And that is there are lots of ways to be good. There's no sort of like one version of this is what a good football team is. And I think Nebraska so far, 3 games is a limited sample size, et cetera, et cetera. So far, it has looked like they know what they want to do. They mostly execute on it. They don't like wildly shoot themselves in the foot. And when things do go sideways, it doesn't spiral. That is, I think, one of the big differences is like bad teams. All teams make mistakes. All teams have turnovers. All teams, receiver runs the wrong route. Protection gets mixed up. Like, you are not going to make it through a game, and you're certainly not going to make it through a month of the season without mistakes. Good teams move on from them. Bad teams kind of let them snowball and get worse. Nebraska was a team that did that in past vintages. It was like, when you think about a lot of these, so many of the like late game collapses, or the like, oh my God, Nebraska lost another single score game or whatever. The end of the game is what gets the most attention. But when you went back and looked through those games, you're like, oh, 8 bad things had to happen. And if you took out 2 of them, Nebraska maybe wins that game. And that to me is, I think, the biggest difference. So I will say, provisionally, that yes, I think Nebraska is a good team right now. For sure.
Let's clip that.
Yeah. Cut. You're an Eagles fan, is that right?
Yeah. That's just a choice I decided to make initially as like an internet goof, and now I like live it in full time.
So that game Monday, which I watched in its entirety, the absolute impossible, unthinkable. There's no way you could have lost that game.
Yeah.
We've done that 30 times in the last 10
years. Right.
Like, that was like, I was watching that game and I was like, I would hate to be an Eagles fan right now. I was like, oh, Ryan's an Eagles fan. That's crazy. He must have that must have been horrible. But like that, like, all Saquon Barkley's got to do is just catch this pass and this game's over. We've done that. We've done that 25 times.
Oh,
right.
We invented
but
that.
That's a good example of what I'm talking about. Obviously,
we reinvented that.
Saquon Barkley dropping that pass is terrible, and is like very clearly if this doesn't happen, the game goes a completely different direction. That said, you can go back through that game and you can find out like, oh, here are like 5 other things that were like really boneheaded and really messed up. Like, I think it is pretty rare to find a football game where you can really go down to like, if this one thing hadn't have happened. Like, the closest I can give you really and truly is that Seahawks Pats Super Bowl.
Right.
Like, that's probably the closest, just because like what it took for Seattle to even get down there in the first place was sort of like, this was a miracle you're here in the first place. But anyway,
that it's like that it's a great point. I appreciate hearing the outside perspective, because there is this element of like, I would intentionally listen to national writers, because I was like, God, we're so close. We're like a point away, and they're like, you guys had 5 turnovers. You fumble snaps. Like, you're not that close. You're not close. I'm like, oh, we're just a snap away. Like, it's a play. And they're like, no, you're 5 turnovers away.
And against Big Ten West teams, like,
right.
That we are just absolutely scratching and clawing. I had a theory at one point that like ESPN's FPI, you know how that like changes during the game.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of times that we reached 99% win probability and didn't win, like, I think that we had their engineers just scrambling. Like, they were just like, okay, like, we need to rethink all the numbers, because something's broken. Every time they hit 99, they lose.
Yeah.
But we're back. What do you think of,
we're back.
We got Illinois. What do you think of the Big Ten? I love your expert outside opinion, because we're so far in it. I'm like, I don't know. Is Illinois good? I don't know. It's like the rest of the Big Ten. Like, what do outsiders think of the Big Ten? What do they think of like the new conference?
The challenge I am facing, and this is true of almost every conference at this point, but especially the big ones, is I'm so used to processing everything through the frame of divisions. Like, divisions sort of like were useful, not just to know like who everybody's playing, but like to make you think about who do I really need to think about you? Who do I really need to compare you against? And when you had divisions, it was pretty easy. It was just sort of like, okay, here are the 7 teams. Here are the 6 or 7 teams that I need to stack you up against.
Yeah, pretty predictable.
To figure out like and it made it digestible, because it was like, well, if you can, to go back to Iowa, like, is Iowa as good as Ohio State or Michigan most years? No. But they don't need to be. Like, what they need to be is the best team in their division. Same in the SEC. Like, South Carolina has been a really weird team this early in the season, but I'm having trouble remembering, like, oh yeah, they're like a lot of teams that I'm used to them playing that they're just not on the schedule anymore. that's a very long way of saying that I am between that and the fact that these conferences are just so big. I'm having to adjust to things like, okay, Nebraska could be, let's say, the seventh best team in the Big Ten. I'm not saying they are or they aren't, but that could be true. And on the one hand, that doesn't sound very good. Like, that means there are a lot of teams better than them. And on the other hand, that means, like, well, you're in the top half of the conference.
Yeah.
And it might be a pretty good conference to be in the top half of. So there's just, like, a lot, like, that between that and the fact that we're going to have fewer data points between a lot of these teams of just, like, you played and how did it look. I feel a little unmoored with all of it. I also think it has really thrown off my sense of what non-conference games mean at this point. Like,
What do
know,
is anyone going to schedule them anymore?
They will, because there's money to be made in that. Like, ESPN is going to want them to happen. ESPN is not going to want, unless ESPN can successfully, like, twist the SEC's arm and be like, you got to play one more conference game, that they might take the switch for. But, like, they don't want these, overmatched non-conference matchups that aren't that well attended, and that it's like, well, we got to put one of these on. We got to figure out which one of these we got to care about. The Big Ten as a whole, I think, to me, there is a similar feeling to the Big 12, with the exception of, like, I am waiting to see what the top of the conference looks like.
Okay.
Everybody sort of assumes it's going to be Ohio State, maybe Penn. Like, if you had to pick who the top 4 teams are in the Big Ten right now, you'd probably say Ohio State and Penn State. I know Michigan's undefeated, but I don't think you'd probably put them in that list right now. And then it's maybe a question of, like,
Oregon.
Is it USC and Oregon? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, USC's only played 2 games, but one of them was LSU on a neutral field. And
If it were a house, where would you see Nebraska? Are we in the front yard? Are we already knocking on the door? Do we know where the address is? I mean,
yeah, you definitely know where the address is. I think Nebraska is sitting in its car, making sure that there's no mustard stains on their pants. And so far there aren't. So far the pants look good. But before we go up to the front door, we're going to make sure, because we're Nebraska and we've been to this party before with mustard stained pants and we had a bad time. And we're not trying to do that again. But this is going to be the weird thing, is that, like, you can, what do you do if you go 7-5 in the Big Ten or the SEC this year? You might be a really good team. And that's not just blowing smoke about how good these conferences are. It's just that they're really big conferences. That's really what it comes down to.
100%. So getting into, I guess, Nebraska, Illinois, a top 25 showdown.
Yeah.
With our last bit here. How do you see this game? Is this a prove it game for Nebraska? Is this bigger for Illinois? Like, which way do you see this going? And what do you know about Illinois?
Because it's in Nebraska, because it's a home game, it probably is more of a prove it game for the Huskers than the Illini.
I think so.
I think if Illinois loses, it probably, I don't think it, like, really throws a lot of stench on them. I think if Nebraska loses this game at home, a lot of the air will come out of the 3-0 start. Yeah. It doesn't ruin things, and it doesn't, like, mean like the season is lost or anything like that. What I know about Illinois is that under Brett Bielema, they play a ton of one-score games. They drag, I think, over half of their games since he's been there 40 games. 21 of them have been one-score games. And they're like, look, they end up being coin flips. They end up being coin flips for Illinois. Like, I think they're only 11-10 or 10-11 or something like that. Like, it's not like, oh, these guys are just so clutch and they just know how to win these. But they drag most of these games into the fourth quarter. And I will say, I think Brett Bielema probably gets not enough credit for maximizing what his team can do with the
Yeah.
talent that they have. We have seen versions of Illinois that like play big slobber knocker, control the clock, run heavy football. We have seen versions of Illinois that are like, we have passers and receivers, and like that's what we're going to do with it. Like I think they are fairly malleable in a way that you want your team to be. Also, like getting a thing that has largely been lost in the discussion at this point. Brett Bielema's like 525 or so winning percentage at
Is that right?
Illinois. You have to go back to John Makovic in like the late 80s and early 90s to find another non like single game interim coach who's over 500. It should not be, even though no, is Illinois, winning 10 games consistently? No, but like it is historically a very hard place
Just make winning look
win.
impossible.
Yeah.
Yes, and like it is a place where like, can you occasionally have that like, oh my god, we won 9 games kind of season? Maybe. But like to consistently get to bowl games or get close to bowl games is very, very hard. I think probably because things went so just kind of sideways and meandering at Arkansas. Brett Bielema probably doesn't get enough credit for actually being like a pretty solid coach and like
Wow.
giving his team as much chance to win as they possibly can. Are they like recruiting enough and doing this, that, and the other to
Probably
consistently be in the top of the Big Ten? No. But
Bielema for us is he crushed us at Wisconsin. So like everybody here has the highest level of respect for him. I feel like in the college football world, because he was a failure in such epic proportion down in Arkansas, he sort of got cast away of like those guys become cast off.
Yes.
He came back to the Big Ten for us. We were like, oh God, are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
Like this guy again?
Yeah.
Like we just got rid of him. Like that was the only reason we beat Wisconsin was because like he finally left. We're like, oh, thank God. I mean, we still have been terrible against them, but like he dominated us because of his ability to figure out the run and strong defenses. I agree, he's a great coach. I just think the broader college football world at large sort of was like, nah, this guy's just because of the Arkansas failure, they kind of cast him away, but he can coach.
Well, and I think what happened was everybody was like, well, Arkansas could be better than this, and they're not. So Brett Bielema must not be that good. And Wisconsin, under Barry was always good. So like, really, how much of that was Brett? I think when you look at what has happened to Wisconsin and Arkansas since then, it kind of casts a lot of doubt on like what Brett did at Wisconsin wasn't that impressive, and what he did at Arkansas was super disappointing. It didn't work at Arkansas, and I'm not going to argue that it did, but like there's a lot of evidence at this point that suggests that the Arkansas job is not some like walk in and get 8 wins situation.
God, no.
And Wisconsin is not a walk in and get 9 wins kind of job either anymore, and hasn't been for a while, frankly.
It's not going to be. I think they're going to struggle this year without their coach or without their quarterback. Without
Van Dyke.
Van Dyke's done for the year. I think it's going to be a tough year for them this year.
Yeah. So this is all a very long way of saying like I think this is going to be a like tricky back and forth. I think this is going to be a 1-score game entering the 4th quarter. I think if it's not, that probably means Nebraska is better than we thought.
It's cruising.
I don't like. Is it possible there's a version of this game where Raiola, throws 3 picks and Nebraska does that snowball mistake version?
No, obviously there's
theoretically, I suppose it is. But I think if you look up and it's like, oh, one team's up by 17, that team will be Nebraska. It won't be Wisconsin, or it won't be Illinois. Rather.
Ooh, that is music to my ears.
We are 14-6-1 against them all time. Our first game was in 1892, which we won 6-0. Thank you very much. Not to brag. They have only scored more than 21 points in 6 of those games. 5 of them were between 2018 and 2022.
Not great. Not good.
21 times, it was 5 years in a row until last year when our defense stepped up. I mean, for me, I am going all in on the Black Shirts. They're going to be who win us this game. Their offensive line stunk it up last year. I mean, like poor Altmaier was back there just peeing down his leg. I mean, and you could hardly blame him. They allowed sacks on 10% of their pass attempts, which
Ooh, that's a
really,
bad plan.
really
That's
rough.
my expert opinion. That's not
Every
a thing you
10
should do.
times he's
Yeah.
not only running, he's sacked. So our D-line, I think, could have a heyday again. I feel like that's where things we can make up a little bit of ground. And then they lost. I mean, it's so random for Brett Bielema to churn out NFL defensive linemen from Illinois. They had 2 NFL draft picks on their interior line, and now they're kind of struggling to stop the run. They struggle against like Central Michigan. I mean, and whatever other directional school they faced, and then Kansas. I feel like this is like has a classic Big Ten West game written all over it, which is just punt it well, run it better, and shove it until like
make your field goals.
Just make it hurt. And make your freaking field goals. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where the direction that I see.
Well, I think this has got to come down exactly what you were asking Ryan at the beginning is what does good look like? And I mean, Illinois is a team. We joined the conference. We beat them just like a drum every time. I was like, this team stinks. And like that to me is what they are. They're a team that stinks, but they beat us 3 of the last 4. So it's like you can't, I can't say that anymore. Any Illinois fan who's on here is like, well, we beat you 3 straight times. Like, yeah, you did. But like we shouldn't ever. It's like Illinois, Indiana, Purdue. They should all fit in this category of teams that we just beat 5 straight years and then just couldn't beat anybody anymore. But I hope it can get back to that. Like I agree, it's probably gonna be closer to that 1-score game, but man, it'd be cool if it'd be fun. I'm just enjoying, truthfully, and I know we got to wrap up here, but I'm just enjoying being undefeated. It's so fun. We've been Andrew and I have been doing this HuskGuys the podcast and the Twitter following everything for like 14 years. We have grinded through some just atrocities. I mean, and our entire thing is on like hopeless optimism, and we're gonna win. This is the year. My hat says this is the year. I have to throw this hat away like mid-September every year. I can't. I'm like, I never get to wear this thing, but now I get to. I'm like, man, just let me keep going. Let me keep going. Keep going. I mean, give me a few more weeks. Like there was in 2016, Mike Riley went 7-0. We knew we were gonna lose after that, but it was so fun. And we finished 7-5. Is that right? I think we lost 5 straight. But that 7-0 was so fun.
God,
sure.
It brought all of the hope and optimism.
So fun.
The Kool-Aid was flowing through the gutters of Lincoln. I mean, it was just what a time to be alive. I mean, Illinois is going to be that kind of team. They're going to want to run the ball. Hey, against Kansas, I'm looking up their box score. They ran the ball for 2.3 yards per carry on 34 carries. So they just kept trying to run the ball. I mean, and that's Big Ten. That's Iowa football. That's Illinois football. That's pretty much Minnesota football. I hope to God it's not Nebraska football because I think that we have the better quarterback in the game. The only difference this year is that Altmaier seems to be passing a little bit better. He's got 6 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. And then their defense actually is, other than being unable to stop the run, they're got 9 turnovers forced on the year. So I think this ends up coming down to just one of those, like, you run the ball well, you punt the ball well, you got to force turnovers and pray that Dylan Raiola survives and plays another mistake-free game. I mean, it's ridiculous that he's completing over 70% of his passes on the year. Like that is.
We haven't seen a good. This is what good quarterbacks do. Most like you look at any stat. Look at
I
any
don't know
stats
how this works. I don't.
Good quarterbacks, like if you look at
Penix
last year threw like 2 interceptions the entire season. Like good quarterbacks don't. We're just so used to like our quarterbacks throwing 15 interceptions a year. That we're like mind blown.
This is the first time in years we've been turnover positive after 3 games. Years.
The twist I want to offer on that. Yes, that's what good quarterbacks do. It's also what good coaching does.
Sure.
Like, especially with, and this is true of Tennessee as well. Like when you have a freshman quarterback that you're like, we're going, we're throwing him in. He's brand new and we're making it work. So much of it really comes down to like, how much are you designing the offense to enable your quarterback to make quick, good, easy decisions? Like, you talk about, like, we can complete a screen pass. To me, it's not just, like, can we complete a screen pass? It's, like, are we using screen passes smartly because they're an easy pass to throw? Like it's hard, it's hard for a screen pass to turn into a pick. It's hard for a screen pass to turn into a sack. Like, do these things happen? Yes. We live in a very stupid world where so many things can go wrong. But, like, I think for Nebraska, Tennessee, other teams that, like, this was true, like, the first Bo Nix year at Oregon, frankly. Like, it's really about, like, how can we make it so that you are going to have the least opportunity to fail? Like, how can we set you up to succeed as a quarterback? And, like, I think sometimes we are too quick to make it like a quarterback is good or bad and less about like what is the system that they're in built to allow them to do? Is it putting it all on them to play hero ball? Because like if you're an awesome quarterback, sometimes that'll work. But for a lot of like pretty good quarterbacks, hero ball goes south real fast.
I feel great. This is good. I'm glad we had you on. I was feeling nervous.
Yeah.
Now I feel great.
All right. If Illinois loses, it is my. If Illinois wins, rather, it is my fault. Just to be clear.
I love it. No, it's good. Okay. I want to be. I think we committed to an hour, right? I want to make sure you get to back to your kids. Interview and wrap this thing up.
We'll see if they stayed in the house. I'm excited to find out.
It's just within the confines of the home, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think tomorrow's gonna be a fun one. I think the additional battles I'd be watching out for is Zachary Franklin and Pat Bryant. Those are the wide receivers on the outside. We got Tommy Hill matching up against Zachary Franklin. Probably it's going to be an awesome one to watch. I cannot believe we are in a top 25 battle with Illinois in September. I mean, who saw this coming?
America.
Not me. It's going to be awesome. Everybody go and subscribe to not only the Shutdown Fullcast, but to We're Not All Like This. There's a great episode on Nebraska. I was honored to be a part of it. And we just kind of commiserate with other fans and stuff. And you can listen to their wild, wacky stories and stuff along the way and how we're all sort of in this college football thing together. And even though the titles were not all like this, we all sort of are kind of like this. And it's just this wild confluence of fans and sort of like minds. But Ryan, any other like parting shots, anything else you want to promote, anything else?
No, I think we hit it all. You know what? Screw it. Let's get Nebraska to 4-0. Let's just make things interesting.
Why are we not? Why would we? Why would America not vote for that?
I'm scrolling this across the bottom. Everybody check out @Celebrity Hot Tub. I'm addicted to get this thing. I'm going to be following this. 100K is a big one. Once you get six figures, that's a fun one.
That's true.
I've been chasing that one for a minute. We're at 61,000 almost. So we're that's the next milestone. 50 was fun. But now I'm like, what's the next one?
I think we work a lot harder at it than you do, though.
Yeah, he goes back. He's an OG. He's no G.
You're a Twitter you'll never know how many of these are bots. I'm never going to reveal that.
You're a Twitter OG though. You're like you got to be at least like a 2011 Twitter guy. That's like
I don't have to answer that question.
Anybody that goes back to like the early days of Twitter like knows the grind to build one of these things.
Yeah. I've been on Twitter enough that I remember when the character limit was half what it is.
Exactly. Awesome, Ryan. Thanks for joining us. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for joining the HuskGuys podcast. Check out everything that Andrew was saying. Check out the HuskGuys store, pipeline-jerky.com. Go Big Red. Let's beat Illinois. And the voice.